everybody. Hope you're all well. Yeah, it is still dark here in Chicago. The nights are drawing in, or at least basically the mornings aren't starting off that early. But the weather is still pretty clement here, and or I understand remains so until November. So that's good. Right. Okay. So let me just introduce my panel, and I have with me today. I've got Gareth. Hi, Gareth.
Hello.
Okay, and then we have Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Now, I'm not too certain about Kevin. Is Kevin with us? Nick, can you see him?
No sign of Kevin or Laura, I don't think.
No, okay, so Laura's got a crisis on that she's dealing with, and Kevin forewarned me that he had a crisis looming that he may have to deal with. So that's obviously turned up. So I'll certainly be looking towards the audience to chip in on today, because today is really more sort of discussion stuff. So if you want to join in, raise your hand. Just let us know you want to come in. We'll make certain your microphones are open. And if you've got any comments or anything like that, if you put those into the message box. Nick is there today. Nick Turner, he's marshalling, so he'll pick up any other notes and he will open your lines and let me know that you want to join in. And there's always a risk that I might just ask you a question anyway to get you to join in, because we want to keep these conversations going and relevant. We want to really hear from all of you. We've changed these over the last few weeks so that we do hear from you rather than just me wittering on. Okay, so that being the case, I shall witter on a bit. I just want to do a quick update on the IOAA conference that I attended here in Chicago last week. I think Kevin told you that this was like the valuation office. It's a little bit more complicated than that. This institute of assessors is a sort of combination of local authority officers up to, but not including, the billing of local taxes, both commercial and residential, and the valuation office and the land registry office. It was a really interesting conference. Some really top-notch technology that they are using, but a lot of the problems that they're facing and what they're dealing with were very similar to the same ones that we were dealing with. What I thought we would do, and they're quite keen on this, is maybe do some joint workshops with them to share some information. So my first question out to the audience is that the kind of thing you would like to do? I'm not thinking about doing these every week, but maybe once or twice a year. Would anybody like to comment? If they think it's a terrible idea, can they tell me?
I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think it's probably a very good idea.
Yeah,
Always nice to get a different perspective.
Yeah, it is, and their problems are very similar to ours. I think I certainly benefited from going to the conference last week. Certainly learned some quite interesting stuff. What do you think, Gareth?
I don't know enough about what the kind of workshops would be, but I've spoken at a couple of conferences in America in the past of a thing called the Alliance of Information and Referral Services, which is a kind of network of advice services, and they certainly had a lot of really interesting things to talk about, and have got some really exciting kinds of pieces of work that they've done. Like they actually have a thesaurus of different kind of services, because they don't have monolithic social services such as we do. So they have lots and lots of tiny agencies who use different names for things. And that in itself is interesting. But the really interesting thing is they have a very good set of processes for determining what they call ghost services, which is a problem common across the world to third sector, I guess, where people say they do something but don't in reality, or don't do it to the standard expected. And their processes for identifying those are really valuable.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe we should connect up with them as well. If you've got a contact, we could perhaps do some joint workshops with that group as well. It's certainly. I'm always a bit critical of the US when they stick international world in front of something. That normally, what they mean is just the US. But in fact, actually, there were Koreans here. There were Norway was represented, Ireland. Of course, a lot of countries that would normally come just couldn't come because of the COVID rules, including the IRRV, who normally attend, as I understand. Okay, and then the other thing is that we are at the IRRV virtual Scottish conference this week. That begins, I believe, tomorrow. We're presenting, I think, tomorrow on the future of revenues and benefits frontline service delivery. So we're going to be talking about.
It's Wednesday and Thursday.
It's Wednesday and Thursday. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so Wednesday and Thursday, but we'll be speaking there. Originally, it was going to be Damien Lewis who was going to be speaking there, but unfortunately, Damien has gone down with COVID, and so is pretty rough at the moment. So, unfortunately for the Scottish conference, they'll have me instead, which is probably not the pool they were originally hoping for. But anyway, this should be interesting. We're going to be talking about futuristic stuff, which is actually just not that futuristic, just around the corner. Okay, so that's conferences. I think in general, I think the thing I wanted to mention about the stats, all the stats are updated in the slide pack when I send them out, is having a look at the trend on the number of claims submitted. So that's the number of people who will have an entitlement. And as I always say, this is about claiming, this is not about caseload. But that does seem, the trend line does seem as though it's holding up. The numbers are not generally dropping, and are slightly on the increases we might have expected. Okay, as Kevin's not with us, we're not going to be able to do the council tax and business rate stuff, so we'll just get into the discussion. I had three kind of discussion areas I wanted to bring up today. One of these certainly came out of the WhatsApp group that we're running, which is about the cuts to universal credit. So let me start with that, if I may. So Amanda, are you on by any chance? Is Amanda on?
Hi, Malcolm. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so maybe you'd like to start the discussion. I've got your question that you put into the WhatsApp group.
I was just saying to, in response to something somebody put on, that we're receiving reports from our customers that they're being advised already exactly when the cuts are happening, which universal assessment it's falling into. So a lot of them are already aware, or they mostly should be, because of those notifications. Probably what they're not aware about is how it's going to change things for them in other ways, like, with the CTS. And some people probably cease to have any kind of entitlement to universal credit or CTS if this changes. It's possible.
Okay, so I'd be quite interested in what other local authorities are doing. We'll have to come out to the audience. I hope some of you don't mind telling us what's happening in your areas.
I can put my hands up, Malcolm, and tell you what's happening here.
Yeah, please, yes.
Nothing at the minute, I would say. There's nothing being done, simply because there's so much being done, so much that needs to be done. So I think what's going to happen here is that as the notifications come through, adjustments will be made, and then the customers will be advised, different things that are affected. So that's what's pretty much going to happen.
Okay, but it's. I mean, because it will affect CTR. Do you think there's going to be a reliance by local authorities for the messaging just to come out from the DWP? But wouldn't it be useful if some of the messaging came out from local authorities?
Absolutely. In my opinion, they definitely, yeah.
There's also this dreadful postcode lottery in that local authorities are treating universal credit in different ways and income from universal credit in different ways across their different schemes. You'd normally expect, I suppose, that a reduction in income from universal credit should mean an increase in council tax reduction. But for people who come off CTR and because some of the strange rules are around, that isn't necessarily going to be the case.
No, I mean CTR for a lot of local authorities is the passport into the CTR scheme for those on low pay. So if they come off universal credit, in effect, they'll probably come off CTR as well. But I don't know what local authorities are doing. I think, again, as you say, Gareth, it's a bit of a postcode lottery in terms of addressing people who are just on a low income by virtue of the fact they're no longer getting their CTR. Has anybody commented at all there, Nick? Or?
Nothing in the chat at the moment.
I've invited comment, both verbally or typed in, so we'll see how people go.
One of the things that I've found really annoying is the government stance saying, yeah, but of course, because we're going back to work, all you've got to do is to work a little bit harder to make up that £20. And I've actually done some sums. I'm doing a piece on it for a blog at the moment. And if you want to make up your £20 CTR from earnings, well, the very minimum it's going to be if you're on low earnings without paying tax or NI is £234 a month extra earnings to get that £20 a week. If you're paying NI, then it goes up to about £300 a month, just under. And if you're paying tax as well, it goes up to somewhere around about £330 a month. So you've got to work a lot to get that extra £20 back, you know.
Yeah, and none of that has been addressed, has it, at all in universal credit? There's a kind of illusion going on at the moment that universal credit somehow works, but I'm not seeing any evidence at all to support that.
No, I mean, I think we're going to see the kind of the perfect storm bit, aren't we, with the for self-employed people, the end of the SICE grant, the reintroduction of the minimum income floor, and for everybody else, the end of furlough as well. So we're going to be seeing a perfect storm of kind of reduced income and reduced benefits and increased need.
Yeah, and Liz, of course, you raised last week and increased inflation.
Yes, increased inflation. If you possibly, we don't know, but the leaks are that the government wishes to increase national insurance contributions, which, as we all know, hits the young people and low paid much more heavily than anybody else. So you combine everything that's happening: inflation, increased utility costs, potential ending of the triple lock, everything. It's really a very, very difficult situation for those people on low incomes. Listening to whatever his name was, Zadawi, on Sunday, and he was basically saying that, you know, we want to return the universal credit position to the way it was before. It is extraordinarily generous. I mean, it was just nonsense, arrant nonsense, you know, from people who have absolutely, yes, here I'm not remaining calm, am I? From people who have absolutely no idea of what it means. You have no idea of the cost of rent, no idea of the cost of living, really, for poorer people. And then you lump national insurance on top of it.
Okay, so that brings us into our other part of the conversation, which is about the increases in taxation. So so there is the plan to raise national insurance contributions. That looks like that's going to be a bit of a challenge. What do you reckon, Gareth? Will they get away with raising national insurance?
Well, probably is the answer. They've got a big majority, so they can fairly safely ignore the very few rebels in their own ranks. And of course, as has been said, it hits the very people that this party of government traditionally despises. We don't want to know about young people. We don't want to know about poor people. Well, it doesn't impact anybody in terms of there being nothing that affects people, who have a lot of wealth or non-earned income. They get away with it. So I'm afraid they may very well get away with it, even though they damn well shouldn't. I'm just really annoyed by your slide. Actually, I was rather hoping there might be another option in the final bullet point there.
Well, yes. I mean, it strikes me as though Therese Coffey has proven to be, for the government, a fairly safe pair of hands in terms of running the Department for Work and Pensions. It's never been quieter.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of that's down to what Gareth says. I mean, the government have a whacking great majority, don't they? Things are quite up when you can get things through, however unfair they are. And yes, it is unfair. Personally, I don't see why they just don't raise income tax.
Yes, let's discuss the pension triple lock, because that's bubbling around. I mean, is it a good thing to remove the pension triple lock, or is it going to be political suicide for the Tories on this? I noticed the group, is it silver something? They're not silver surfers, they're silver something. Have been putting a lot of pressure on this. And does politics just get in the way of practical necessities? I mean, if it is a good thing economically to raise, to get rid of the triple lock, then will the politics get in the way of doing that? What do you think, Gareth?
Yeah, I don't think it's a political thing. It's absolutely positive that the reason why there be a potential increase of the level now is just a byproduct of the blip, if you like, because of COVID, on lowering earnings so much last year when the triple lock protected pensioners from that effect. And therefore, if you went back, over an average of 2 or 3 years, then there'd be no question of increasing it by that kind of amount. So I don't think that 2.5% is ungenerous at all, if that's what they're talking about, using the other minimum element of the increase. I think people should be pretty pleased that they're getting that at a time when a lot of other people are really suffering.
Yeah.
I think that they will remove the triple lock, and they'll do it insofar as the argument will be that it balances out the national insurance contributions, which affect the young and the poor. So, but we are doing this. But yeah, I do think politics gets in the way of everything.
And I guess probably, I mean, the key question is will increases in taxation impact on how local authorities are delivering their services, and in particular CPR, because there's not an awful lot of work that is done around the balance of taxations as they affect things like local tax schemes. But that would have a further impact, would it, Gareth?
It's actually really quite complicated. I mean, I've tried to do some modelling around the effects on the local economy of the way in which tax and benefits work together. And when you start trying to do some difficult stuff around looking at the fact that people who are on benefits spend their money differently to other people, they spend it straight away, they don't save it, and they spend it much more locally than people with higher incomes do, then benefit spend has a really big impact on the local economy, because people spend the money in the local shops and businesses, and that supports local jobs. Obviously, it supports the businesses. It provides an increase in local taxation all sorts of things, and trying to work out the bottom line effect of it is nightmarish. From the point of view of local authorities, I guess that you would traditionally say, well, you might get an increased take from business rates and other sorts of local taxation. You might get an increase in people being able to pay their council tax bills and so forth. But what that would mean on a day-to-day basis locally, frankly, I've got no idea.
Yeah,
which is the way of saying I don't know, I suppose.
No, and I mean that is important, isn't it? Because when you stimulate local economies, that actually bubbles up through the national economy in a way which actually just giving more money to entrepreneurs and better off people, because they don't spend their money in the local economy and they're more likely to hoard it. I mean, there's some arguments about they may make bigger contributions to charities and things like that, but that kind of modelling of how that works has remained more or less consistent since the 1700s, hasn't it? That
oh yeah, trickle up works, trickle down doesn't.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Nick, has anybody wanted to comment or come in at all? I mean, we're always keen to hear different points of view or different comment.
Kim has just put a little note on there asking, will we see similar with the triple lock to recent change to the applicable amount for HB, that those that reach SPC age from April 21 get a lower personal allowance? Question mark.
Yeah, okay, can you repeat that, Nick?
Kim, do you want to talk about it, or are you happy just being on the text?
What I was thinking was where the triple lock is concerned. Could the government possibly take the decision that they will remove the triple lock for pensioners from a certain point in time, in a similar way that they've lowered the personal allowance for pensioners from April this year? If you reach state pension age from the 1st of April onwards, there's a new lower personal allowance for those pensioners. And I suppose that's a way of cutting costs for the lots of working age people that are now becoming pension age and going away from universal credit and going back to housing benefit. Could the taxation system or do something similar, or could the triple lock on pensions do something similar? I mean, I know none of us know the answer to that, but could this be possibly the way the government go, so that they maintain their key voters that they have, the pensioners at the moment, and only lower incomes for those new pensioners?
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, this is why this modelling is so complicated, isn't it, Gareth?
Yeah, you should see some of our recent affordability modelling, because we run our big future benefits model. Been doing quite a lot of affordability modelling on rent levels for housing associations and so on, and it gets really complicated when you're trying to look at people, particularly older people, and older people with younger partners in mixed age couples and so on. It's really getting very difficult to try and look at those sorts of figures and identify what we're talking about.
I think this change in April came in very quietly and unseen.
Well, no, it was announced 5 years in advance. It's just it wasn't publicised as is the want. Yeah.
Yes, that's my point. It wasn't publicised, and people just didn't realise it was coming.
But but the point you're making, Kim, I think is a valid one, because you could see how that kind of thing would possibly work in terms of the political mechanics, as well as possibly the in getting some kind of balance within the system itself. I know we're always very quick to criticise the Tories on not thinking those kind of things through, but actually, I mean, they do have quite a big team of civil servants who do have to do that kind of modelling and give those kind of options. It's just the motivations we kind of worry about, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. Well, when I looked at local taxation here in the States, for residential, you know, equivalent of council tax here, when I was at the conference last week, it was interesting because the valuation office, I guess, as Kevin described it, is also responsible for the equivalent of CPR. They award it, but it is all done on circumstances. It's all discounts and reductions based on you meeting a set of circumstances. There is no means testing at all involved in it. You know, you are either a single parent living in a house or you're not a single parent living in a house. It's quite interesting. Okay, it's
yeah, but to be fair, it's both. It's also very state variable, Malcolm, and a lot of the US kind of social welfare schemes, like temporary aid for needy families and so on, are designed to cover some of those kind of areas of expenditure as well. And those are means tested.
In fact, it can vary within offices within state as well.
Oh yeah, county to county.
Yeah. Because I live in County Cook here, or Cook County as they call it. Get it the right way around. Yeah, and that's quite different from other parts of Illinois. Even though it's all controlled largely by the state, it does vary from office to office. Yeah, it was quite interesting. But again, it was interesting to hear the mayor of Chicago talk about this, because she spoke about the importance of these kind of local welfare schemes and about local taxation and the modelling of local taxation, how important that is to the economy. You know, she was addressing it from an economic point of view, which I'm still not particularly convinced that local authorities are doing, because if they were, I don't think they would come up with some of the schemes they have come up with. Would that be your thinking, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's like a lot of public expenditure. It's been driven to in-year budgeting and in-year accounting. It hasn't been able to take account of kind of longer-term effects, and that's a really important omission in a lot of, I think, local government budgets in particular. And you understand the pressure why you've got there. But I think there's also just not enough sophisticated modelling, as you say. You don't go beyond the first step. If we increase this rate, then that should bring in X pounds more. It doesn't go on then to say, but of course that reduces the spending power of these people, and they will reduce their spending in this area, which in turn would affect that, and so on and so on.
Yeah, and in part, again, that touches some of the stuff that we were doing at the conference last week. A lot of that is access to data, isn't it? And ironically, I mean, local authorities have got quite a lot of this data that they could be looking at themselves, but don't seem to know how. I mean, a lot of modelling I have seen just doesn't address these questions at all.
Because it's difficult and expensive, and frankly, local authorities' staff pressures and time pressures and just resource pressures are such they haven't got, in very many cases, the in-house expertise to do it.
No, but also there isn't a lot of options for them to go outside of the local authority either. You know, that what I'm saying is that kind of sophistication is not necessarily that readily available either.
No, and to be fair again, it's not certain in the sense that you can say if you do this, then this will happen.
Yeah.
Best you can say is, well, if you do this, then this might happen, and the odds are, from 20% to 90%, and it's very hard to make decisions on that kind of basis as well.
That's true enough. Okay, let's just round off today, which kind of links into everything else. The Resolution Foundation, who are quite prolific, they've just published another report called Welfare at a Social Distance. The headline for that is the pandemic had united people, but old attitudes to welfare are starting to return. Liz, do you have a view on this? There's some numbers on the screen for you as well. We lost Liz.
Liz is still showing us there.
I muted myself because I had to answer somebody here, so I muted myself. So I'm back now. Do I have a view on it? I haven't actually read this.
It's brand new today.
Is it? Well, that's why I haven't read it then.
Yeah.
And it says that the extent the overall change. And as what they're saying is that the obviously that the old attitudes are returning. So whereas we had this rather nice idea that actually welfare wasn't as generous as most people thought it was during the pandemic, mainly because I suppose there were more people who were actually in receipt of welfare in one way or another.
Yeah.
But now, of course, that people are returning to work or that we're coming out of it, that is, I suppose it's not understandable to me and probably not understandable to people who work in this area, but as the general public, that's what's going to happen, I suppose, sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say that my suspicion is that you know, those extra 4 million people that have now had a year or so on living on universal credit will probably have had their attitudes changed quite a lot, because they'll have discovered that they're not leading their lives of luxury, you know, eating foie gras and drinking champagne on their John Lewis sofas while watching giant flat screen TVs, which is what was painted for them. And maybe their attitude change might continue. And certainly what I found really interesting is that we have completely seen the disappearance of the reality TV tabloid press benefits grandeur campaign issues over the last year, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, we have done. I'm a little bit surprised that public opinion would spring back too quickly. I mean, but that having been said, I do think people sometimes have short memories. And the other thing that we have at the moment is, you know, we have a jobs crisis, you know, that we cannot fill jobs. And I think if people are going to the supermarkets and the supermarket shelves are empty, as I understand that's how it is there in Plague Island, that may well harden their opinion, because that's affecting them directly, and then maybe they're thinking, oh no, all these people claiming benefits, why aren't they driving lorries? You know, that kind of thing.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. I mean, I think we did touch on this last week, actually, although neither of you were there, about the fact that, you know, it's not very well, but it actually costs quite a bit of money to train as a lorry driver.
It does, yeah.
You know, I remember, you know, vividly the jobs that used to be available to people there were always quite a lot of them were lorry drivers, but nobody who was receiving job seekers allowance in those days could afford to retrain as a lorry driver.
Because lorry driving is a profession, isn't it? I mean, it's a skilled job that you know, not, you know, that you have to learn how to do it. I mean, you know, I couldn't sort of rock up when I return in October and, you know, suddenly start driving lorries. You know, I wouldn't know where to start. But isn't that the same with quite a lot of this kind of work? It does require more skills than people assume.
Oh yeah, there's a whole pile of incredibly skilled jobs out there that people tend to assume are not skilled, and that's a real problem. And of course, the other thing we have to recognise is that the jobs market changes, and the kind of jobs that are around change very fast. I mean, I used to sit on Social Security appeal tribunals, and the standard thing then from as it was DHSS at the time saying was, there are plenty of jobs around. This person could do a job such as a petrol pump attendant or a lift operator. When did you last see a lift operator or a petrol pump attendant? There must have been a lot of them at one time, and they've clearly gone on to do other things. But it takes time to retrain, and it takes money to retrain and to run the courses.
Yeah, it also, I mean, it does also show, doesn't it, how sort of the change for the general public as well. I mean, a lift operator is a prime example. I mean, there used to be a need for a lift operator, and it wasn't for health and safety issues. It was because, you know, it was felt that was what was required. I mean, you know, self-service in lifts has been around for a good few decades now, hasn't it?
Yeah. And those dreadful voice-operated ones and so forth. But
yeah.
have you seen Jeremy Clarkson's farm program? It's quite amusing and so on. But his kind of sidekick on that is, you know, a young agricultural labourer, as they would have been called. You know, always considered to be low paid and skilled, still low paid. But the amount of skill that person has to have in terms of operating sophisticated technological kind of pieces of equipment, of understanding scientific processes, of testing soils and so forth, was just eye-opening to me. And yet, you know, they're still there, flagged on all the ONS figures as being, you know, low-skilled labour.
You're obviously not a listener of the Archers.
I used to be. It got too depressing, I'm afraid.
But yeah, I mean, they've covered off quite a lot of that whole thing. That, you know, the skill set needed to be an agricultural labourer now is immense. And of course, I'm up early enough, even if I'm in the UK, to hear Farming Today, which is it's always an eye opener. Those programs. Right. Okay. Nick, has anybody shown an urge to come and join in on this conversation?
We've just been hit with a wall of shyness today, Malcolm.
Okay.
Post-holiday blues, I guess. Oh,
yeah.
Kim's got a hand up again.
Yeah. Come in, Kim.
I was just going to make one final comment on the jobs front. That is that some of the traditional low-paid jobs, such as at supermarket tills, they're being automated.
Mm-hmm.
Go into many cafes and restaurants now, you have to order your food on the app. You don't get anybody coming to your table. Also, there's been this rush of people going back to restaurants and cafes as they've all reopened, and everybody's under the illusion that the hospitality industry is now raking in so much money. However, I know of several small cafes that are now laying staff off. Yes, they have the numbers, but the people that are going in are ordering one pot of tea and one cake for two people more often than they used to in the past. So they have just as much work to do, but the profits are not there.
Yeah, so, I was going to pick that. I was going to pick that up, Kim, because that's quite right. I mean, the assumption that the hospitality industry is raking in money, but their overheads have increased considerably, and as you say, those that are coming in are spending less money. Can I just also touch on the other point that you made there, which I think is valuable, which is the move to new technology and things like that, in order to be able to. You know, the people are looking at more self-service. You know, I mean, I've been to plenty of restaurants. I mean, I think it's Pizza Express is a prime example where not only can I book my table online, but I can order the food online so that when I arrive with my party of, you know, million kids that I have, you know, the food all arrives within minutes of us being there, and that reduces down the need for you know the staff to be coming and saying, you know, do you need more time to order, and you know, what would you like, and let me tell you what today's specials are, and would you like a jug of water? You know, all of that kind of disappears, and that kind of ties in a bit to what I'll be talking about tomorrow at the Scottish Conference, and Damien will be speaking more on at the IRLV conference in October, which is just how much technology is changing all of that. And I think probably starts to really open up the discussion about things like basic income. Certainly opens up the conversation, but basic income is expensive, isn't it, Gareth?
I think it depends how you do it. I have to declare an interest. I'm a trustee of the Citizens Basic Income Trust. I've been for several years, and I've done some modelling and written quite a bit around what we call hybrid schemes, where basic income is used as an income type within kind of existing means-tested benefits and so on, which gets over some of the problems around people with particular needs and housing costs and so forth. And no, there are zero cost models around that are demonstrably workable, and they are generally quite progressive. They move income around from the wealthier deciles to the poorer ones. But more interestingly, they open up then the opportunities for people to do things differently. So I'm a great sort of believer in them, and I don't think they're expensive in the sense that they are unaffordable. They just require a bit of work.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that, Gareth, because I think the debate over this is going to probably open up. Maybe we'll do a specific session on this and get to hear you speak more widely on this subject.
I would refer you to the Palgrave International Handbook on Basic Income that I wrote a piece for, but it's far too expensive to buy. I wouldn't dream of buying a copy of it.
That's fair enough. I may already have a copy.
Oh, right.
Right, okay, on that basis, we'll draw today's session to a close. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Liz, for being here and contributing. Thank you, Amanda, as well, for coming on and speaking, and Kim as well. It's always good to hear other voices on here. I hope some of you get over your shyness and will come and join in. We'd like to hear some dissenting voices. That would be great. Right, on that basis, I will close down today, and thank you all, and see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. How do I leave?
I'll log you out, Liz. Don't worry.
No, it's all right, Mark. Come on. I was just muted.